life vest lies? What? The life vest / cushion that the hubby, Lynette Hooker's husband, says he threw to her has been found floating. But no Lynette. This as her husband walks. Lynette Hooker's husband has walked free and says he doesn't want to go into the details of her disappearance.
The ocean doesn't just take people. At least that's what they say. It may hide secrets. It may delay answers, but it rarely erases someone completely without a trace. And yet, in this case, something doesn't sit right. A flotation cushion, something light, something meant to save a life, was found drifting calmly on the water. But the person it was thrown to, Lynette Hooker, was nowhere to be found. No body, no confirmed sighting, just silence. And somehow, the one person who was with her that night, her husband, Brian Hooker, is now walking free, offering a story that raises more questions than answers. It all begins on what should have been a normal evening. The couple had been out, enjoying time together near the water in the Bahamas. Nothing about the day suggested it would end in mystery. But as night approached, decisions were made. Decisions that would later be picked apart by experts and investigators alike. They chose to head back late, using a small dinghy, just 8 feet long, not a large, stable vessel, not something built for rough conditions, and certainly not something meant for strong winds or darkness. Yet that's exactly what they were facing. According to Brian, the wind had picked up, around 25 knots, nearly 29 miles per hour. The waves weren't calm either, rising into a choppy, unpredictable pattern. Visibility was dropping as the sun disappeared. It was, by most boating standards, a dangerous situation. And still, they were out there. No life jackets, no proper preparation for what could go wrong. Just the two of them, alone in the water, with conditions working against them. Then comes the moment that changes everything. Brian says Lynette bounced off the dinghy and fell into the ocean. That word, bounced, has stuck with many people. Because how does someone bounce off a small inflatable boat and disappear so quickly? Was it the force of the waves, a sudden shift in balance, or something else entirely? Only his account. He says he reacted immediately. He grabbed a flotation cushion, the kind typically used for seating, and threw it toward her. He couldn't tell if she caught it. He claims the darkness and waves made it nearly impossible to see clearly. Still, he insists he tried. He called out to her, again and again, for what he says was nearly an hour. No response, no sign of her voice in the wind. What follows is what he describes as a cascade of failures. One thing after another going wrong. The motor's kill switch, gone. The oar, broken after a pin snapped. The dinghy, drifting. Every tool that could have helped him, suddenly useless. He says he tried to signal for help, flashing the light on his phone at passing boats, but they were too fast. They didn't see him. Then he says he used flares, bright, unmistakable flares, and still, no one noticed. But here's where the cracks begin to show. Reports later suggest that when the safety equipment was checked, all the flares were still there, untouched, accounted for. If that's true, then what exactly did he fire into the sky that night? Or did he fire anything at all? And then there's the drift. Brian explains that he was eventually carried away by the wind and current, unable to get back to Lynette. He says he anchored the dinghy at some point, but only after drifting a significant distance. Eventually he reached another island, alone, exhausted, alive, but Lynette was gone. Here's the problem many experts have pointed out. If the wind was strong enough to push him away, it should have pushed Lynette in the same direction. That's how currents work. That's how wind behaves on open water. Unless she was actively swimming against it, which would be incredibly difficult in those conditions, they should have drifted along similar paths. So, why was he found, but she wasn't? And then comes the discovery that deepens the mystery. The flotation cushion he claims to have thrown to her is found floating in the water. Still there, still visible, still intact. The very object meant to keep her alive managed to survive the ocean. But Lynette didn't. Or at least, she hasn't been found. At this point, the story begins to shift from tragedy to suspicion. Not because there's proof of a crime, but because too many details don't align. Too many things rely on coincidence. Too many moments where everything just happens to go wrong at the exact same time. And while all of this is unfolding, something else stands out. Brian's actions after the incident. Instead of organizing search efforts immediately, instead of being seen desperately combing the water for any sign of his wife, he's on the phone. Long conversations, detailed explanations, telling friends exactly what happened, step by step, almost as if he's trying to make sense of it, or make others believe it. When he does speak publicly, his words raise even more questions. He says he doesn't want to go into too much detail because he doesn't want to interfere with the investigation. But many find that strange. Because in cases like this, every detail matters. Every second could help locate a missing person. So why hold back? Even his emotional responses are being scrutinized. In interviews, he appears shaken. His voice cracks. He wipes his eyes. But observers notice something missing. Tears. Actual, visible tears. It becomes a point of debate. Is he in shock? Or is something being performed? And right in the middle of all this uncertainty, the reality remains unchanged. Lynette Hooker is still missing. No confirmed location, no recovery. Just an open ocean and unanswered questions. Meanwhile, Brian Hooker is free. No charges, no detention. Because, without a body, without clear evidence, there's no case to hold him on. But people are watching, listening, analyzing every word, every inconsistency, every silence. And before we go deeper into what doesn't add up, take a moment, because stories like this deserve attention. If you're drawn to real cases, unresolved mysteries, and the truth behind them, make sure to subscribe to Midnight Casefiles. Like, comment, and share. Because sometimes, awareness is the only way stories like this stay alive. Because what happened that night might not be as simple as it sounds. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the ocean looked calm again. Quiet. Almost as if nothing had happened. But somewhere beneath that still surface was a question no one could answer. Where was Lynette Hooker? And how does someone vanish so completely in waters where, according to locals, bodies are usually found? Search efforts did begin, but not immediately at the level many would expect. Time, those critical first hours, had already passed. And in cases like this, time is everything. The longer someone is missing at sea, the harder it becomes to trace where they might have drifted. Yet even with that delay, one detail continued to bother both experts and those closely following the case. If everything happened the way Brian Hooker described, then something should have been found by now. Something more than just a cushion. Because here's the thing about open water. It doesn't just scatter evidence randomly. Wind, tide, and current tend to move objects in patterns. Predictable patterns. And according to experienced boat captains and rescue experts, if Brian drifted in a certain direction for hours, Lynette should have drifted in a similar path. Maybe not exactly side by side, but close enough that search teams would have a reasonable area to focus on. Instead, there's nothing. No confirmed trace of her beyond that single floating object. And then there's the timeline. Lynette reportedly went missing on one night. But Brian wasn't immediately detained. Days passed before serious questioning took place. That gap, those crucial days, raises a difficult question. What exactly was happening during that time? Because instead of a frantic, visible search effort led by a desperate husband, what emerges is a different picture. One of phone calls, conversations, detailed retellings of the event to friends and acquaintances. Some of those conversations were recorded, and in them, Brian walks through the night step by step. The wind, the waves, The broken oar, the lost motor key, the darkness, the failed attempts to signal for help. Over and over again, the same narrative takes shape, almost rehearsed in its consistency. To some, that sounds like someone trying to process trauma. To others, it sounds like someone trying to solidify a story. When questioned publicly, he becomes more guarded, asked simple but critical questions. What exactly happened in those final moments? What were the last words exchanged? He hesitates. He deflects. He says he doesn't want to interfere with the investigation. But that explanation doesn't sit well with many observers. Because in a search for a missing person, details aren't interference. They're lifelines. And then there's his behavior when it comes to actually searching. He says he wants to find her, says he believes she could still be alive, talks about renting planes, organizing help. But visible action? That's harder to find. There are no widely reported images of him out on the water leading search efforts. No urgent calls to the public asking for assistance in a direct, emotional way. Instead, his presence is mostly in interviews, explaining, reflecting, repeating. For some, that's where the disconnect grows strongest, because grief often drives people to act, to search, to do something, anything, when a loved one is missing. And yet here, the focus seems to remain on words, rather than action. As investigators and journalists dig deeper, another layer begins to surface, one that shifts the story from just a mysterious accident to something potentially more complicated. Allegations from Lynette's daughter emerge, claims of past domestic violence. She describes incidents that date back years, patterns of behavior, moments that, if true, paint a very different picture of the relationship. It's important to note, these are allegations, not proven in this case, but they add context. They introduce the possibility that what happened that night might not exist in isolation, that there could be history behind it. And when stories like this surface, they tend to change how everything else is viewed. Every unanswered question becomes more urgent. Even neighbors and family members speak up, describing times Lynette reportedly left the relationship, seeking space or safety. Again, nothing here proves what happened on that boat, but it challenges the idea of a perfect, inseparable marriage that Brian himself describes in interviews. Meanwhile, authorities face a difficult reality. Without a body, without physical evidence of a crime, their hands are limited. This is what many refer to as a no-body case. And while those cases can still lead to convictions, they require strong, undeniable evidence. Evidence that, at least publicly, hasn't surfaced here. So Brian remains free, not charged, not held, able to leave if he chooses. Though even that comes with complications. He claims their passports were lost in the water that night, supposedly attached to Lynette. If true, it creates another layer of uncertainty. If not, it raises yet another question. And still, the biggest question of all remains unanswered. Where is Lynette Hooker? Because despite searches, despite attention, despite growing public interest, the ocean has given nothing back. No confirmation, no closure, just absence. Locals in the area have even pointed out something unsettling. While drownings do happen in those waters, it's rare for a body to remain missing indefinitely. Currents, tides, marine activity, eventually something is usually found. But not this time. And that absence is what continues to fuel doubt. Was it truly a tragic accident? A night where every possible thing went wrong at once? Or is there something more beneath the surface? Something that hasn't yet come to light? The truth is, right now no one can say for certain. There are only pieces, fragments of a story that don't quite fit together. A cushion without a person, a husband without answers, and a voice that explains everything, except the one thing that matters most. And as this case lingers, it becomes another reminder of how easily the truth can slip away when it falls into the wrong place at the wrong time. So as you sit with this story, ask yourself, what do you believe happened that night? And if you want more stories like this, where the facts are real but the truth is still just out of reach, make sure to subscribe to Midnight Casefiles, like, comment, and share. Because sometimes, the only way to keep searching for answers is to keep the story alive.